Oh, Odile was asking, so where are your ancestors from? Are you Irish? An Irish
and Scottish. Yes.
Irish and Scottish here, up there in the Northlands.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of bracket England.
That's right. Sorry if I seem distracted. I'm just making sure that everybody is getting into the meeting. Just us so far. Hopefully the others weren't scared away.
Well, it took me looking back to find where you had posted this on the calendar, and then everything was simple. But I'm a little challenged on all these cyber connections.
I'll keep it posted on the website as well. So that's another place you can go to look for it. But I'll also fill out the calendar with invites that contain the passcode.
And the website is what?
It is. Do you have your agenda in front of you? It should be at the top of the agenda, the shortened URL. Let me pull that up. It is a2gov.org/council commons.
Council Commons.
Yeah.
No of and no the.
That's right.
Good.
Just to make it short and simple.
I think I can handle it. Just get it in.
Meeting to order here. We'll let Alan, there we go. Call the meeting to order. And I think we start off with a roll call. I think we all need to state our names and the municipality we're located in. Is that right, Heather?
That's correct. Yeah, where you physically are right now. Yeah, you don't need to provide any more detail than that. So don't give your address out or anything like that. Just kind of, hi, my name is such and such. I'm here in Ann Arbor, assuming that's where you're at.
Okay.
Or fourth ward, right?
Yeah, I guess you could get that detail, but you don't need to.
Heather, could you do the roll call for us?
Sure. Stephen Borgsdorf.
Present here in Ann Arbor.
Great. Jennifer Cornell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Alan Haber.
I am here in Ann Arbor.
Jeffrey Henney.
Present in Ann Arbor.
Camila Lizundia.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Rita Mitchell.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Alice Ralph. Oh, you're on mute.
Alice, you have to unmute. Alice, you have to unmute.
There you go.
Not yet.
There. I had to try it about 4 times. Here in Ann Arbor.
Wonderful. Frank Wilhelm.
Here in Ward 5, Ann Arbor.
Adam Zimke.
Here and in Ann Arbor.
Tom Crawford.
Here in Ann Arbor.
Jeff Hayner.
Here and also Ann Arbor.
Erica Briggs.
Present and in Northport, Florida.
Ah,
Ooh, nice weather.
Yes. I'm leaving tomorrow.
Very nice. All right. With that, I think we move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the approval of the agenda. Also wanted to offer up, this would be a time if anyone wanted to offer amendments to the agenda, that we would need to do that. Can I get a motion for an approval of the agenda as written? Rita has her hand up. Call on Rita.
Thank you. I would like to make an amendment to the agenda would be in item 8C. I'd like to include a discussion of gardening, preparation, and early planting and beautification of the library lot area.
Okay. And I think we need a second on Rita's amendment.
I'll second that.
Second it. All right. Second from Jeff. I think we need to ask for a vote for the amendment to be added to the agenda. Can we all do this at once, or can we do it by hand?
I think we're allowed to do it by voice and hand.
Voice vote.
yeah, you can do that and just ask if anybody
Jeff.
doesn't, objects, just to make sure that there
Perfect.
isn't somebody outstanding.
All in favor of amending the agenda to include the item that Rita enumerated, say aye.
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 Any nays?
Aye.
Okay. All right. That agenda item is added. Councilmember Briggs, did you have your hand up as well?
I was just going to move or second or.
Yeah. Perfect. Any other amendments to the agenda? All right. In that case, we have an amended agenda. Do we need a separate motion for the amended agenda? Or are we, I think we can move that directly, if I recall correctly.
We can move to approve the amended as the agenda is amended.
As amended, that's correct. Yep.
I'll move.
Sorry.
Then you can take my motion if you want.
Thank you very much. We'll accept that. Can we have a vote on the approval of the amended agenda? All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. All right. So we have an amended agenda. We have the next item on the for business is the approval of the minutes from last week. Do we want to pull those up at all, Heather? Do we have that ability?
Since this is remote, it might be easier, I think, since that's attached, to not pull stuff up unless we need it, would be my recommendation.
That's fine by me if it's fine by everybody else. It was linked in the agenda.
Right.
Just to pause, it appears that I missed Sarah on roll call. I'm so sorry, Sarah
I
Hammerschmidt.
didn't
Are you
want to stop the
here?
meeting. I am here from Ann Arbor. I didn't want to stop the meeting for that. I just didn't know if it needed to be in the minutes.
No, that's okay. Thank you for calling it out, and I apologize for missing you.
No worries. Could I get a motion for approval of the minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes as written.
That's right.
I'll
Second. Okay. Rita, you have your hand raised.
Oh,
You're muted.
Sorry. I just wanted to call out, this isn't a big deal, but there was an item about the proposed bylaws and it wasn't commented, and we did have some discussion. It just seems like we should note that we had some discussion. We didn't approve them in that first meeting.
Yeah, these minutes are pretty bare bone. They'll reflect any decisions that are made, but not really go into any details of the discussion.
Okay. So if it's blank, what is the understanding of that?
That the topic was discussed, but that there was no decision made or no motion made.
yeah.
All right, no problem.
Okay. Any other discussion on the minutes, approval of the minutes? So there's a second on the floor. If all in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. All right, so that we are accepted through that. Now I think we're a public comment. We have allow 2 minutes per speaker. Are there any members of the public who have indicated a desire to speak? Okay, seeing 2 participants. I am having trouble seeing whose hand is raised. Heather, is that something you can see?
I can. I'm sorry. I was talking and I was muted. The person with phone number 340, you should be able to talk.
Yes, greetings. You all can hear me, I'm sure.
Yes.
We can.
Okay, thank you. My name is Luis Vasquez. I live at 1442 Pontiac Trail in Ann Arbor, Michigan. And my comments include the following. I'm going to ask you the question, why do you not have a representative of AADL on this committee? Aren't they a major stakeholder on this block? My second comment has to do with funding for any of these projects going forward. This project was sold to Ann Arbor voters as being funded privately, with Alan Haber, Will Hathaway, and Frank Wilhelm promising to raise funds. In fact, in November of 2018, in a MLive article, I'm going to quote it. After November 6th, if Prop A passes, Frank Wilhelm hopes to put his energy into raising community donations to fund the Central Park. And they quote him as saying, "I only wished I had this kind of setup to raise serious money for a community benefit. It's going to happen." In December of 2019, in another MLive article, Frank Wilhelm vowed last year to put his energy into raising community donations to fund the park/commons if voters approved it. He said recently he still wants to do so once there's a concept to present to donors. But in today's MLive, Wilhelm argued the Center of the City initiative should be a public-private partnership and the city should put a substantial amount of money behind it. It has to be substantial enough to attract private support, he said, encouraging the city to be bold. Well, I'm of the opinion that not 1 cent of taxpayer money should go towards any of this. And if you want funding, you guys need to get a petition and a referendum together to ask taxpayers to fund anything moving forward. Or, take a look at selling off maybe the Huron Hills golf course to pay for anything that's likely to cost, I would guesstimate in the tens of millions of dollars at the least. And additionally, you should start with improving Liberty Plaza first before any money is put onto the library lot. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Vasquez, for your comment. Heather, could you answer the next person?
Yes, it's the person with 464 as the last 3 digits in your phone number. You should be able to talk.
You mean 644?
I had 464.
Oh, 464, yeah, that's right.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Hello.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. So my name is Linda Brower. I live at 421 3rd Street. I was really disappointed to hear that last speaker. I hope you don't get too much of that as you go forward. I'm so happy you guys are meeting. I know it's only your second meeting. And my specific question, and I hope you can answer it before you move forward, even though I know you're going to be talking about the budget later. I read the M Live article that came out today with all of your bios. It was really exciting to see everybody who's on it. And the article mentioned that the city, you have $20,000 from the city budget for this fiscal year, which ends June 30th. And seeing how we've only got 3 months left for this next fiscal year, I'm wondering how the rules work for that kind of city budget. Is it a use it or lose it type thing? I sure don't want you to lose that $20,000, and I would encourage you to come up with ways to spend it to make something happen there, to beautify it. First of all, get rid of the parking, and secondly, do some, relatively inexpensive things to beautify it and make it welcoming, so that we could start using it this summer in a basic, modest way with social distancing and everything. So my concern is that you don't lose the funds that you have, and that you spend them appropriately. And then hopefully, I'm a big supporter of having the city, especially the DDA, and possibly even the Parks Commission, contribute money. I'm not of the opinion that it has to only be privately funded. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
And then
you, Linda.
Odile is next.
Hello. Hello, everyone. I hope you have a great meeting and a good commoning. I wanted to tell you that spring is coming. I have seen the first daffodils. So the garden committee met on the site last week, and we're going to meet again this week. And we are going to try to proceed to start envisioning the gardening and the beautifying. I think it's important because now is time and the earth is still soft. And we are watering the Christmas tree that we have put in December. But anyway, we want to put flower and beautiful butterfly garden. And we would like to let you know that the more we do things, the more people are likely to fund us. So it's a direct relation to what we do to get funded. Anyway, that's all I have to say. I wish you a good meeting. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Odile. Heather, do we have other commenters?
I don't see any others at this time.
Okay. All right. In that case, we will close public comment. We don't need a motion to close public comment, do we? No. Okay. In that case, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, the bylaws. There are 5 documents listed in the agenda. with some revisions. We did just receive the bylaws today. I would like to offer up a discussion around the bylaws, given that there are a number of responses. If it would be okay with everybody, maybe we can have staff comment on some of the feedback. Does that seem like a good way to start out?
Silence.
Makes sense to me.
Okay.
I do feel at a deficit because I only found out that the bylaws were available somewhere this afternoon when I was working on another meeting. So I haven't had a chance to look at them.
I think I'm in the same boat, Alice, as well. They did just get sent back to us today, and it's unfortunate. I think things are just going slowly. But I think good, Heather. Or why don't we go to Alan first? See how the question his hand up, and then we'll open it up to staff to talk about some of the comments that were made. Alan.
Well, I had the same feeling that this came late again as it did last time, and I would prefer that we have some general discussion, but actually put it off to the next meeting and not get into the short hairs of the various questions here. That is my feeling. I think the things that have some substance to that we should have a little more ahead of time. But if people want to proceed with it, that's okay. There are just a lot of things there, and I would rather that people really have a time to look at them and think about them.
Are there, Alice, you have your hand up?
Yeah, I sense that we will have time to review, that we probably can't come to a point where we can approve what's certain when we don't know what it is. But I hope that there's been some sorting out of what actually should be in the bylaws and what can be in rules. I think that that's where we will find the flexibility and the individualization of the bylaws to our commission. That's all I would say right now.
Councilmember Riggs.
I'd just like to note, and I think maybe Heather might be able to speak more to this, but in terms of reviewing some of the the attorney comments back to us around the bylaws, it seemed to be repeated sort of recommendations that the bylaws are our rules, and there's really shouldn't be a separate set of rules that we operate by in terms of how commissions usually work. So that was one of the pieces of feedback that was kind of throughout the bylaws in terms of comments.
I think we have a couple more questions here. I think Stephen, you may be next.
Just a short comment. I did have a chance to look at the bylaws as revised this afternoon. They looked good to me in terms of the types of edits that came back. So I encourage others to have a look, but I just wanted to put that out there that I did have a chance to look at them. So.
Very good. Alice, you have your hand up too.
Yes. Now, what was it? I'm sorry. I'll come back if someone else wants to talk.
That's okay. Well, given the length of the time, Heather, would you like to make any comments on some of the legal review as you manage staff?
Yeah, I have to admit that I haven't had a chance to really read through them either, since they did come in a bit late. And our attorney apologizes. He was working from the old schedule, which would have put it out a week, and you would have had a week to review it. So sorry about that. So I do think it's good that this group is taking some time to read through that and make sure that you feel comfortable with the bylaws and come back to it at the next meeting.
Alice, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I got it back. It was, I know the bylaws do address the opportunity to establish standing committees and working groups. And that's where I found rules might be more important, because if we develop standing committees, that might go in the bylaws, but working groups are pretty temporary, and it would not seem to be useful or workable to have the formation of working groups have to go through this long amendment to the bylaws, that kind of thing. So that's my concern.
Councilmember Hayner.
Thanks. I'm sorry to jump off the topic. I'm getting some texts from people who are saying they're trying to get in on Zoom and they're being bumped, and they're getting a message saying you're unable to rejoin this meeting because you were previously removed by the host.
Oh,
I know Ron Suarez is one. I don't know if his name is ID'd out there, but I just wanted to share that with you. I didn't know what was the best way. Sorry to
okay.
get off the track here, but people are texting me. So it's like, it's not letting Zoom members in somehow. I
Okay.
know they can't join our actual meeting, but
Right.
I
Yeah, I'm
think
not
they should
seeing
be
any
able to
other.
sit in the participants, shouldn't they?
Yeah, they.
Okay.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'll keep looking at that to see if I can come back in.
All right.
If I could add, Councilmember Zinke, if someone wants to participate, they could call in to that phone number. And I think if the computer version of the video isn't working, at least they can use the phone number. That's part of the meeting notice.
Yeah.
What number is that so that somebody can hear if they're listening?
That is.
There's a series of them.
Yeah, there's a. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, whatever. The first one on my list is, that's iPhone one tap, but telephone dial is, there's an 888 number, which is 888-788-0099. Also 877-853-5247. If you dial in that way, you should be able to get in also. And you may have to enter the webinar ID, which is 933-1585-9113. Hopefully that's correct.
Listen, if those numbers are on the agenda, which if it isn't accessed yet, it's on Legistar under our council meeting listing.
Oh, I see. Sorry.
Thanks.
Councilmember Briggs has their hand up too.
Thanks. I was just going to comment on the working committees and kind of relationship to the bylaws. And I maybe, perhaps Steph can correct me, but my understanding is that generally commissions and committees, it's pretty typical to have working groups. I know serving on the Transportation Commission, that's often something that working groups do come up. They operate a little less formally, obviously, than sort of the commissions. One of the notes in the attorney's comments to the bylaws was that whether or not they need to be noticed or not just really depends on how many people are participating in them in terms of the Open Meetings Act and pieces like that. I think typically they're, sometimes they're noticed, sometimes they're not, but we can kind of work through that as we go with staff and attorney guidance. But oftentimes, having served on Planning Commission or Transportation Commission, there aren't necessarily a separate set of rules or bylaws to guide them. They don't necessarily have to be identified within the bylaws. They're just sort of permitted by the commission as a whole.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember. It appears that there are a number of folks who are interested in postponing this agenda item. We probably need to make a formal motion to do that. Would somebody like to make a motion to postpone the adoption of bylaws?
I'll move.
Second, this looks like second by Alan. Is that right?
I'll be happy to second it.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
All those in favor of postponing the adoption of bylaws for the Council of the Commons, Center of the City, say aye.
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 Any objections? Okay.
Not an objection, just can we sometimes we do a date certain, like, can we make sure that it's on the next agenda? We'll deal with it. Okay,
Next agenda.
thank
Yeah.
you.
Yes. Is it acceptable to, I think we could probably amend the motion to the next agenda. That was a good point, Councilmember Hayner. Next item on the agenda is review the Center of the City Task Force report. And there are two items that are part of this agenda item. Heather, that we received some questions from some council members when you sent these out. Would you like to talk a little bit about the difference between the items and start off with the presentation?
Sure. Just a moment. Let me get the screen shared. Sorry. If you can just bear with me in just a moment. Okay, so the first item is the Center of the City Task Force presentation to City Council last March on March 16th, which was actually the first day that there was the lockdown at City Hall. So this was the last live council meeting, I believe. I'm actually just going to play you a clip from that meeting, which is the Center of the City Task Force chair and the vice chair presenting this information. And it's a summary of the task force report. So I thought we'd start with that and then just open it up to conversation and questions about the work of the task force. So can everybody see the video that's paused currently? Okay, I'm gonna start playing it then.
Thank you. I'll turn it over. Hi, good evening. Hi, everyone. I am Megan Musaf. I am chair of the Center City Task Force. And Miles, I don't know if you want to introduce yourself. And thank you for the opportunity to come and give you a little bit of an overview of our report and what we sort of come to as a group. So let me make sure I can do that. Yay, okay. So as a reminder, this is the task force. There was a group of people, 9 of us, community members, and then 2 liaisons from City Council. One is Council Member Hayner, and other representative was Council Member Smith. And we represented a lot of different, I think, experiences and expertise. We had some urban planning, we had some architects, we had some students. I'm a librarian, right? So we had a lot of people come together to sort of work on this work together. And there are just 3 of us here today, but I just really want to really drive home that the work that we're presenting today was a group effort. We never would have gotten this far without this amazing group of people to sort of steward this work and work together. Like looking at Miles to make sure I'm like saying everything. As a reminder, this is the task that was given to the task force. So we were asked to 1, engage citizens in visioning, long-term planning, and immediate and intermittent uses, building toward the final vision for the center of the city on the library block. And 2nd, to develop recommendations to help determine the next steps to advance the development of a central park and civic center commons known as the Center of the City Commons. And this is just a little bit of an overview of the process that we went through. So step 1 was to really think about all the information and all the work that had gone into thinking about what to do with those spaces, what to do with that land. We had 1 round of soliciting ideas from the community, and we'll talk about a little bit more about this as we go on today. Then we sort of came back together as a task force to sort of review what we heard and develop some preliminary recommendations, think about what opportunities we had to go back to the community to ask for information. We again brought that back together and then used that information, used what we heard from the community to develop a final set of recommendations. I'm kind of talking fast because I know we have a short amount of time. All right, I'm going to give it to Miles to talk about notification. I want to use them.
Well, since you all have the PowerPoint, I won't go through reading word for word from it, but I will say that thanks especially to Heather, we were able to use really all of the city's abilities for contact we used digital contact, email, social media. We physically mailed about, I believe, 6,500 copies of a flyer that you'll see later on. And then a big part of our contact was actually person to person and hearing people's ideas and soliciting their feedback. We had a number of input opportunities as well. At both of our open houses, at our task force meetings, and through our use of our idea pod on both Library Lot and on Liberty Plaza. And throughout our process, we were both pleasantly surprised and very happy to see the
I've lost the audio. Is that just me?
Yeah, no, I think that's me as well.
I don't have audio.
All right, let me see what I can do.
This is all covered in the task force report, is it not?
Yeah, this is a summary of the task force report. This was the presentation that was given to City Council. I can stop it if people feel like they know enough or have heard enough, but this was really meant to give you some grounding for those of you who are not that familiar with the work of the task force to hear what the work was.
Well, I recently read the task force report, including its own summary, so I just wondered if that was, if this was the same.
Heather, how long was the recording you were planning on playing?
I think the total is 10 minutes.
But why don't we see if we can get the audio working?
All right, let's see what I can do.
To sort of get people to have
it
a
working?
conversation, engage in
Yeah.
the issues that were surrounding, like what do we as a community do with this space? And just a shout out to Alan, who is here, and then also our colleague John, who spent a lot of time talking to community members during these two engagements. And I think we actually have two pictures here. So you can see like it was an amazing opportunity to like really engage at sort of a deeper level with people from the community about what we might do with this space. The other thing we did to gather community input is that we held 2 open houses. So the first one was in November, and we had about 150 people would come from the community and engage with us around a number of issues about, who's the audience for this space, ideally what kind of activities happen there, other sort of questions that we posed to the groups, and we tried to have a very interactive open house style to try to get as many perspectives and many viewpoints as we possibly can to sort of help inform our recommendations. And there's another picture from that open house. The other thing we did is that we worked together as a group to design a targeted mailing. One of the things that was really important to the group as we did our work, and you will see that it's one of our recommendations for the work moving forward, is that we wanted to try to make sure that we invited the entire community into this process, making sure that we heard diverse perspectives, made sure that we heard from not the typical voices that sort of come to, city open houses. Like, how do we engage with the entire community? So we worked together to send out this targeted mailing. I believe we sent it to 6,500 people. I'm looking at Heather for. We printed another 1,000 beyond that. And we printed another 1,000 just to sort of hand out. So this was another way that we tried to pull people into the conversation. And then we held a second open house in January, and this one had about 75 people. And I think originally, as we were planning towards this open house, we thought we would list some preliminary recommendations and get feedback from the community. But actually what happened is that we found out there was just some open-ended questions, some conversations, some points of tension really in the community about what we do with this space. So we used the second open house to really try to dive deeper into this, like, okay, we're hearing this, this need for housing. Can this space move towards that? What other sorts of things can we really talk about as a community to try to move this conversation forward? Feel free to jump in at any moment. And then this is just another picture from that open house. Oh, and then another picture from that open house. All right. I'm just going to keep on talking. Let me know if you want to jump in. Okay. All right. So one of the things that was asked of us as a task force was to create a vision for the space. And just as a reminder, this is the space that is bounded by 5th and William and Division and Liberty. And this is our vision for that space. Our vision is to create a space that is inclusive and welcome to everyone, that is safe, active, and fosters a culture of peace and nonviolence, is easy to see, easy to get to, and easy to get through, is flexible, adaptable, and sustainable, and is inspiring and promotes lifelong learning. And so definitely this vision has been informed not only by the work of the task force, but everything we've heard from the community. And I think one of the things we definitely want to drive home is that, you know, we didn't solve all the problems, and in some ways we just started this work. And so it's really important as this work moves forward that we continue to engage with the community to get further input, to sort of bring them into the conversation.
So I think
Yeah, go ahead.
one other thing you'll notice is that in our report, we don't have any designs or anything of that nature, any very specific and concrete steps as to what should happen in the future. Instead, this is more of, as was already said, it's a step forward in a process that's going to be longer, but it's also going to be very much community focused and community driven. So even though we are not coming here with the answers, we're still very proud to say that we took a step that we think is going to put us in the right direction for a somewhat novel idea on how to design public spaces.
Awesome. Okay, so that's our vision. And then the other ask of us was to do recommendations. And we have made 6 recommendations about the future of these spaces. So I'm going to read them. Number 1 is facilitate the formation of the Ann Arbor Council of the Commons. This group will be formed to sort of think about programming and other activities for the space. Number 2 is schedule regular meetings of a Center of the City Block Partners Group. As we did our work, we found it is very, very crucial to the success of the space that we pull in all partners that surround the space, including business owners, including residents, including the library, and other important partners. Number 3 is remove ground level parking on the library lot parking structure and begin efforts to redesign as an active public space. It was very evident from our community engagements that having some sort of active space for discourse was really important to the community. Number 4 is authorize initial planning for the long-term development of the center of the city block as a priority under the city's master plan. Number 5 is authorize initial planning for the development of the public spaces on the center of the city block. So a reminder, those public spaces are the top of the parking structure, but also Liberty Plaza. So giving both of those spaces some attention and love and care. And then number 6 is negotiate potential agreements or easements that allow the future expansion and connections of the public spaces on the center of the city block. And so this is just an example of what comes out of our report. So for each recommendation, so this is the first one, facilitate the formation of the Ann Arbor Council of the Commons. Included in our report is who we think is the responsible party for moving that recommendation forward, and then a list of goals and action items to sort of help move forward that recommendation. Due to time, I'm not going to go through all of these, but just to give you an idea of what's included in the report. We wanted to spend a little bit of time, and we've talked about this a lot, but I want to drive it home, that, you know, what informed these recommendations really was the community input that we've received. And so, you know, like Miles said, we had a number of different ways to gather that input. And in some ways, like we had over 500 people like respond to our survey, right? So we had a lot of information from the community, which I think really shows an investment in this space. There's a real desire to sort of form the future of what happens. We were also really informed by the past work that has gone into thinking about this space. So this space has been a point of conversation in our community for a very long time now. And so we really wanted to honor that past work, honor those conversations, honor the work that got us to this point in time, and to build off of that, not start from scratch. And then the other thing that really, I think, informed us is that, you know, one of the things that is included in the resolution and our charge was to think about commons and commoning. And I think I speak personally for myself that through this engagement, through the people who have come and shared their time with us, shared their expertise and their experience, we've really learned about, you know, what is a commons, what does commoning mean, and how we might do something like this in our community. Oh, last thing. So the last thing we did, we sort of informed our recommendations, was also thinking about, you know, how do we create sustainable and amazing public spaces? And so there's a lot of research out there. And so using that research, using that work to help inform what we recommended to you today. The other thing that we wanted just to end with is that, you know, we were charged with a specific task and we had a certain scope, but we wanted to make sure that we talked about things that came up during our conversations. And definitely something that came up was affordable housing, the need for more affordable housing in our downtown space, not necessarily in scope for what our work is, but we want to make sure that we let that voice be heard. It's really important. It's a strong voice in our community. So we just want to like recognize that. And then another additional consideration is that, you know, we tried really hard, I think, to try and reach a diverse audience or diverse perspective in our work, but I'm not sure if we actually hit the mark. So as this work moves forward, how do we bring in more members of this community, more diverse perspectives into the conversation about the future of the space? And with that, we're going to wrap up with thank yous. So I'm personally going to thank the task force members. Like, we were charged with a very difficult task, and we did it in about 8 months and 15 meetings. So I can't say enough about how that group came together, and I'm so proud of our work together. I want to thank Heather. We would not have been here without Heather's expertise and guidance and counseling, sort of steer us in the right directions as we plan these community engagements, as we wrote our recommendations. I want to thank Council Members Smith and Hayner for your guidance and for helping us move this work forward. And then really thank the community members for engaging in this, for participating. Sometimes it got a little heated, but I think it's that shows the care and the love that the support has, or the community has for that space. All right, that's all we.
Okay.
All right. Do we want to just move into discussion around the task force report, given that the presentation was more of a highlight of the report? Or would folks like to talk about the presentation at all? Councilmember Briggs.
Just thought I would make a brief comment. One of our callers asked why we didn't have a stakeholder from the Ann Arbor District Library here, and just wanted to kind of highlight from the presentation. One of the reasons is because this task force report recommends that we have that that engagement is happening, but it's happening separately from this group, that there's regularly scheduled meetings, and that's something that should be happening, and interaction between certainly our group and stakeholders around that block as well.
Thank you, Councilmember. Any reflections on the presentation or report? Sarah, I think you have your hand up next.
Thanks. This actually goes along with what Councilmember Briggs was just saying. When I was going through the report and then just now, I think 6 recommendations that they made. I don't even know who this would be directed to, but I was curious like what the status was. I think we know some of those. We've obviously formed with the Council of the Commons. And I think one was about the master plan, and that's still on hold, but the partners group, is that something that's happening? And then I was curious about like our interaction with that group, or I think just like any updates that anyone has. I don't know, Heather, that would be you on some of those recommendations might be helpful.
Sure. Yeah, the partners group has not been formed yet. This is the start. This group right here. You are the beginning of all of this. So the Council of the Commons, which is you, has been created. It's a little bit different than what was envisioned originally. The Council of the Commons was envisioned to be an outside group, to be an independent, either nonprofit or some sort of entity that was helping move things forward. It's now been brought into the city and created as a commission, essentially. But you are tasked. So I think things are going to be a little bit different for this group than what was originally portrayed in the original recommendations. But you were the beginning.
Frank. Or no, I'm sorry. Yeah, Frank, and then we'll have Councilmember Hayner.
I guess we're sort of moving into these specific 6 recommendations, and the one I was going to comment's already been alluded to, that the partners, the block partners, I think this is a critical group, and it should fan out from there, in the adjoining blocks and so on. But I think that the property owners and the major stakeholders on that block, and clearly including the Ann Arbor Public Library, District Library, needs to be, informed and heard from. And I think key to the long-term development of this block as a public park and commons is going to rely on the involvement and participation. I see Jennifer smiling there with Spark overlooking the park and the plaza. Really, and I encourage Tom to get that group organized, and it would include, I assume, representation from the Council of the Commons to participate in that deliberation. I've had informal conversations over the weeks and months and years, and I'm confident that property owners and groups on the block are interested in the success of this, and they're going to be key to access and easements. And so this is a key linchpin of our activity going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Those are great comments. Councilmember Hayner, and then we'll get Jennifer.
Yeah, I'll be brief. So a couple of things. One on the library, and they are, those folks are going to be part of this block partners group, and Alan can maybe speak to this more, but because he went around and did a lot of outreach when he was on the task force, and we had kind of a weird relationship with the library. Like, they didn't really necessarily want to engage initially, and I don't know how it all ended up working out. But yeah, it was kind of a weird dynamic with the library. It was, I don't know how to best describe it, but it was like they didn't seem that interested in helping out initially, and then they realized, well, we're one of these block partners, we're all in on the same block here. So hopefully that has been better. And then number 6, we talked about negotiating potential agreements, easements, and so on. During the task force, it was, I'm trying to dig it up in my email even as we're speaking. I sent a request way back when to our legal staff to create a folder, a virtual folder, or however they do it, to start pulling together all of the information about that block. And it was, any kind of easements, any kind of deed restrictions, the lot lines, the public utility ways, everything. And we just wanted to create a resource. It was all in one place. So if things do start, when plans do start coming together and things start moving around, shuffling around, we get a better sense of what's where, what can be done, who owns what, how access can be granted, and so on. And so I think that maybe that's something I need to refresh again and just send that off, Mr. Crawford and our legal folks, and say, hey, can we get a note there in your department that at some point we need to aggregate all the information about all these parcels on this lot in a very physical way, in a legal way, so that we can see exactly what's going on over there. And we had it generally with the task force, but I don't think we ever had the specific documents to pour through. And I know they must exist, and it's another opportunity to use GIS and so on that the city has to look at some of this stuff. But I think as we move further along in this process, 4 and 5 especially, we're going to want to see that. So, Mr. Crawford, I'm not sure how we'd even get that going, but maybe it's a task that one of us can take on, or a small group can take on, or maybe it's something that has to come from legal or from planning and building services. I'm not clear on that, but.
Yeah, I can check and see where your prior requests, if there's any opportunity that they did. I think what happened a year ago, a lot of things got diverted. But the city, through its regular permitting process for any development, knows a lot about what's underground. There's some we don't know, obviously. When the underground deck was built, they actually did learn a lot there as well. So I'm happy to I will raise the topic. I suspect that until people are ready to put in monies to do ground truthing or checking things more precisely, our records that we have already are probably the ones that we could utilize. So,
all right.
All right. I think we've got Jennifer and then Alice.
My question is around the presentation and the report in terms of data collection and the fact that, the video itself said, we had 500 responses. That's terrific. That to me represents less than 0.5% of the population of the city, if I did my math correctly. So I'm just wondering, I guess I feel like we would be doing our neighbors a disservice if we took 0.5% of input and built plans and made plans around that. And I wondered if it's the charge of this commission or whose responsibility it is to solicit more feedback to be a fairly more representative group, not only geographically speaking, if that was a metric that we used in terms of making sure all the wards were represented, obviously from a diversity standpoint, but I would love to see us get to what, as a marketing person, I would consider a bare minimum, which would be 5% of a response rate in terms of overall citizens' opinions represented.
Adam, can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, please, Mr. Crawford.
That's a good point. Statistically, as the city develops its plans, one of the benefits of having this meeting in the public's process that we have is that over time we advertise this stuff, we make it available, we have copies of it, the videos. So whether people are contacting us or we actually touch them, we're actually providing an opportunity for people to give input, whether they choose to, we can't control. The commission can obviously decide whether they would like to do additional public engagement. I think we would typically, and Heather is one of our experts in this area, I think we would typically actually have developed something and get some reaction to it to really garner some input.
Appreciate that. Thank you for clarifying, Tom. I think my concern is just inclusivity.
Yeah, the additional public engagement that's typically done by commissions is through these type of meetings and having people have the opportunity to do input, to actually formulate, public engagement plan, and to do open houses or gatherings or something like that. That would require, additional work and time and resources to do that. So we would have to talk about that in relation to the budget, I think. And, it might be a scenario where if you want to go forward and make recommendations about a physical design or something, or have a consultant come in to start designing a physical design for the space, then that would be a public process. That would be I would see that as the next stage of getting that input, saying this is what we heard, generally what people are interested in for the space. Now we're really going to start designing it. Please come tell us what you think on these design options.
Good concern that you raised, Jennifer. We got Alice and then you, Alan. Alice?
Okay, just to connect with what Heather just said, we're a long way from that. But also to go back for a minute to Jeff's comments about the physical aspects of the space, I think it's very important. In fact, it's critical to be aware of all those constraints and opportunities before we quote design something. And we also need to understand what is at least mostly realistic that we can achieve. I had a conversation with another architect, and it came up about these flying bridges and stuff like that. I said, well, we don't even know what we're bridging over. And so I've been thinking a lot about having a three-dimensional digital archive of all of these things so that we can have layers about electrical access, water, the movement of water, I looked at an old structural drawing before they had built the underground parking structure, and it showed places where the walls were to be prepared for entrances to the underground parking lot from various of the perimeter participants, such as the credit union and the library and the First Martin properties and all of that. Well, do we know anything about that at this point, 10 years later? So it could be very handy, because if we have a question, it's like a digital folder, as Jeff was talking about, a folder. It's something we use in architecture and construction all the time. To get started, you got to fill in the blanks, and I think that I would like to see if we could have that done. It requires a fair amount of skill and understanding of systems, but I'm not sure where that would come from, whether it would be within the city or we would have to have someone from the outside be paid to do it. So that's maybe we'll start getting to the idea of where money would come from for that. And then I wanted to comment on not just on the summary recommendations, although when I read the task force report itself, there were 6 of them, and I felt that 2 recommendations, 2 through 6, seem to be in our area of discussion, I guess, and whereas the one that doesn't seem to be very concrete is the commenting part, which I think comes from the community rather than from a commission. So maybe we should look at sort of a division of labor where that commenting part is contributed from the community. And that might refer back to the issue of public participation. I think that really meshes together with those 2 things mesh together when you're looking for more public representation and you want to start doing commenting. I think that might be coming directly from the community rather than taken down out from us to the community. That might be a way to take a different approach and maybe get somewhere slightly different. But they also had action steps for these things, and it sort of fell into that same situation. There were 4 action steps, and of those, I could see how we could do 2, 3, and 4, which were the partnerships that we were just talking about, and the parts that early on were different from what they are now, in that we are including the whole block, which includes the library lot, so-called, and the plaza, and Liberty. Is it Liberty Plaza, and Library Lane, which kind of very different ideas have passed through on that, and then also one action step addressed play structures, and that seems to be so much in an area of maybe community interest. I really don't see how a commission is going to get to that very soon. So I wouldn't want to raise expectations on that. And I'm not sure that's as popular as the the partners in the around the block. I don't know, but we don't know that yet. It just seems like we need to find out a lot about the space itself before we start pasting things onto the drawings, which doesn't satisfy very many people when you put a Post-it note on a drawing. But so that's kind of a bunch of things I wanted to respond to what's already been said and what I've been thinking about as well. I don't think we can do everything as from our body out. I think we do need somehow to not really offload, but to realize where the best efforts can come from for certain of these objectives and recommendations.
Thank you, Alice. I think actually that shares some of my thoughts too. I think Alan, you're up next, and then we have Frank.
Yeah, well, I quite follow along with what Alice is saying. I think the activist element is the initiating committee that's really designated by the city council to do this stuff. Set up a playground, whatever is needed in some way of engagement with the community. The task force, to comment on a couple of these things, the task force had before it the opportunity to make a broad outreach to everyone in Ann Arbor on all available media, including a direct mail to the 72,144 separate addresses. And the task force decided not to do that until there was some real commitment to actually go forward with this, and saw that is after the agreement to go forward, then that wide outreach to the 72,144 mailboxes and the internet, Facebook and Twitter and so on, goes forward to actually engage the people in what do we really want? Here we have a place and let's do it. And the task force was seen, the initiating committee following from the task force was seen as trying to find that energy and direct it toward the playground or the kids or the garden or the whatever it is and get it done. And I think it is appropriate to send out that notice, and the city council said there should be a notice to everyone who was involved in the task force activities to follow up and seek to engage their continuing participation or renewed participation. And that is an outstanding task between the initiating committee and Heather representing the city, the outreach, and how we do that is still, we got to figure it out. But that outreach is very much part of the task ahead. But it's also to see that there are things that are going on right now that people are doing, and is not exactly the extent to the, unless people want to set up some working committees to look at kids and look at gardening and so on. But there is a gardening group, there is all this stuff happening, and we need to keep in touch with what is happening and what are the broader concerns that the council is looking at.
Thank you, Alan. Frank?
I guess I'm commenting, responding to a comment earlier. You know, you always want more participation, more involvement. I start with the more than 26,000 people who voted in November of 2018 that they wanted this park in Civic Commons. And granted, that's one data point, but it's a critical one. Here we are, how many months out? 28 months out from that, and we really haven't begun to transform this directive from the public into a working space that benefits the community. I participated in both of the open houses that the task force had. I attended not every meeting of the task force, but several. I was impressed by the turnout at those meetings. They were during the winter months, I recall, or November and I don't know, sometime in the winter. I felt there was a robust response, and granted, it doesn't represent 5% of the population. That number rings a bell because I think that's what we had to get in terms of petition signatures before we even got on the ballot, and that was a heavy lift. And we both have to show movement and action, and things are happening. I think that'll draw more people back into the conversation. But if we don't show progress, why would people carve out time for something that they're not sure is going to happen? I think we have to demonstrate, with the help of Tom and the city council, et cetera, that this thing is going to happen. And I think we're going to get serious attention going forward.
Thank you, Frank. I think I can see why you would say those things too. Stephen, and then Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks, Adam. I guess my question is with regard to the physical space. We talked a little bit about this at the last meeting, but because I've read the task force report and I'm familiar with some of the concepts that are there, but it's a little murky to me specifically what space we're talking about, because I see conversation about easements, discussions around the whole block, discussions around Library Plaza. But when I walk through the site, if I'm understanding it correctly and sort of the use of the whole space, the parking structure remains. Library Lane still remains as a vehicle path for people to get their vehicles into the structure. There's the surface lot is the most obvious space that something could be done on, right? But beyond, it seems that the discussions certainly with the task force were much broader than that. But the physical space that we're dealing with, I think, is much more constricted than that. So that I don't want to get too far down these discussions, or even in the discussion of engaging the community again, unless we have clarity about what we're engaging them about, right? What specific space are we talking about? And so I guess I'll phrase that as a question. What space are we talking about? I mean, where are the boundaries of it?
Yeah, if it helps, the center of the city task force was tasked with looking at all the public spaces on the block. So that included Liberty Plaza, Library Lane, and Kemp House, and the surface lot. This group, I believe, my reading of the resolution is that you're focused on the surface lot.
Correct.
No?
No.
Councilman?
I would suggest that we are bound by the city charter in terms of thinking about, what the charter amendment, what voters passed in terms of looking at the public spaces on that block. But I think to your point, Stephen, that's some of those spaces, like Library Lane is clearly there are some real constraints that, as Alice pointed to earlier, around this space that we need to be aware of, and we do need to very clearly define what that space is.
Councilmember Briggs, you had your hand up too. Did you want to add any other questions or comments?
I did, and I've probably lost a few of my thoughts at this point. In terms of, so I think that building off of, we clearly want to build off of the work that's come before us when there's been a fair amount of visioning work that has happened to this point. And it's a good starting point. It got people excited. There's some good work that we can build on. I think the more that we can be brought to this commission in terms of any supporting documents or anything like that we should be reading through before the next meeting, just to make sure that we have as much of that information to really build off of is important. I think our task is to take this from vision to really tangible, to Stephen's point around, very starting, what's exactly our physical space that we're working with, and start putting into working towards the reality of building a successful space here. Perhaps because so much of my activism has been done in transportation, I have a very long vision and timeline that is often in my head. So when I look at what's been done over the past couple of years, I see that as progress. We have had, this is the second group that's working on that. We've had, a task force that went out and did really robust community engagement, really, quite robust community engagement when you look at the sort of feedback that we often get around development projects or different things like that. And so I think we have a good starting place to be working from. Obviously, we have a lot of really difficult issues that we're going to have to wrestle with in terms of how do we actually build out this space, both in the short term and the long term. Where does that funding come from? We're working through all those questions and figuring out how we make this happen. But we'll probably just have to. I think that's going to be our challenge of figuring out, what are those concrete steps that we can be taking each meeting to be moving forward. But I hope the community sees faith that we are moving forward with this. This is how progress happens. It's not always quick, but as long as we're moving forward, I think we're delivering on the promise.
Thank you, Councilmember Briggs. And Alice, you had your hand up, but then you may put it down.
Yeah, I did. I guess I just briefly
Hand up,
stated.
I want to answer the question about what space we're dealing with. Because having drafted the language of Proposal A, it says we're dealing with all the public land, city-owned land on the library block. And that is the surface of the library parking lot, the library lane, the air rights above it, and Liberty Plaza and the Kemp House. That is the boundary of the commons, how we knit that together as a urban central park and as a civic center, presuming some kind of indoor facility as well as outdoor. That's the area, that's the task. And how we do it best is there's some different drawings, different ideas, and all the particulars that we need to know from the engineers about the constraints on the space. And I did have some consultation on that suggests we could actually build over Library Lane. And so that is another possibility. And the interest that the Martin people have in possibly the city taking over or the commons acquiring the Noble House is part of the picture. That is including the area and the carriage house. And so those are all questions that we need substantial new information from the city. But the space is everything that is there owned by the city or under city authority in some way, or that might be acquired. And that also raises the question of easements, so that there could be entryways into the common area from William Street and from easements and having to get agreement with the other property owners there.
Thank you for that clarification, Ellen. Definitely. Alice, I do want to go back to you to make sure that you had an opportunity to.
Every time someone says something, I think of two more things, but then by the time I get there, I don't have them on my head again. But in order, I was looking at the agenda and I was seeing that we have an item coming up, the removal of parking. And I know that there are issues with that as well as others that we don't have all the information yet. And I would like to say that parking and the access to the underground is now has some new information sort of impinging on that because of the plans of the DDA and to deal with 4th Ave and 5th. 5th and Division, I guess. And they have, those ramps are involved in the turning patterns. If they go two-way with the street and everything, that really is going to impinge on getting to the parking lot and also underground. That kind of thing we're going to have to really immediately start dealing with, because we may decide we're going to do one thing and then these street projects come up and oops, we have to completely do a little spin and adjust to the impact of that. And that brings up partnerships too. You know, the library and the DDA are the big definite partners. We have to have a very strong relationship that benefits all sides in that case. But we don't know enough about it right now. We do need to get more specifics about timing, about engineering, about availability of electricity and water and all that stuff. So I'll kind of go back to the physical program, as Robert Black would say. We need to somehow get a handle on that. So we may be getting to some of that when Tom helps us out with the removal of parking.
Very good points, Alice. I think we've got Frank and then Tom.
This is an interesting discussion. It's easy to get weighed down by the complexity of all the issues on this block. And I'd be the first to admit that this is complicated. I'm continually trying to make it a little more simple and look at it in a linear fashion. I'm interested in what I call establishing a beachhead on the surface of the parking structure, and to begin to convert that into a welcoming space that begins to look and act like a park and commons. I'm not suggesting it's the permanent solution, but until we demonstrate to the community that we're willing and able to move forward on a directive that the public gave us 28 months ago, you know, we just need to begin to take visible steps. It's not the final solution, but we have to act. And along with that, we have to do all the other things that have been alluded to here. Careful planning. You know, the complexity is amazing, but the surface of that lot, electrical connections, adding Wi-Fi, putting some park benches, welcoming people. I think these are things that can be done in the next 6 to 8 or 9 months, and I'm encouraging that we find a way to move forward while we do the deep, longer term planning and execution.
Tom?
Thank you. I find myself like Alice. I've got like a ton of ideas written down on a sheet of paper that I probably want to follow up from earlier here, but let me make a few comments and see if I can help us get some traction. So starting with maybe the most detailed, there's some questions about what the site is and what's there and what's capable. Let me just say, so there is Wi-Fi already present from the library, and they have agreed to maintain that for the intermediate time frame. So the city and the library can coordinate on that, but that is already present. Electricity is already present on the stairwell that is in the middle of the surface lot. It's a little bit high up, if I understand it correctly, but there is access there. There's also access at the street lights up on along the way, but you need advance requests for us to turn those things on. The only source of water is on the division side below ground. It is, I've got to understand it still. There's a meeting tomorrow to look at that a little bit. The question is what do you want to do, right? I mean, I think we should stay away from the engineering myself for a little bit. We need a goal. We need to know where we're headed, and then we can work with the site on how to execute a goal. But is the water that you need drinking water clean? Is it gray water? One issue you will have, just to make you aware, is the surface of the structure is warranted has a warranty on it. We cannot pierce that without jeopardizing that warranty. So, the engineering or expense or whatever may be a little challenging to figure out, but you can solve engineering problems, right? It's just more engineering. So I don't think we should overly concern ourselves with that at this time. I would suggest for us to get some that what might be helpful for us is to break this into pieces. Maybe get some direction on the short term. And I say short term, I mean like plantings. I hear interest in plantings. The intermediate term, that's a whole separate kind of effort that requires a separate stream of thought and analysis. The longer term, which is probably involving more of the block, I don't see I think we need that stream. We need to work on that. I might not launch that next month because I think we need to be focused on the things we can execute right at this moment. So I think there's an opportunity to maybe break ourselves up or at least organize the agenda or something like that in order to break these into streams. But overall, for the city to help you facilitate achieving something that you want to achieve, I would recommend clarity on where those decisions are going to come from. I am it is not clear to me. This is an advisory body to council. So ultimately, I think decisions rest with council, especially when it comes to funds. I would say that, I'm sorry, I have a distraction here at the home life. Just a second, that got me off track. So on the decision making, I've heard a couple of, this is a big deal, right? I mean, there's not clear. I hear one group say that the initiating committee is in charge of programming. I see the presentation tonight that says the Council of the Commons is responsible for programming. It was my understanding when the resolution passed in October, I don't know if that was the true intent, but my understanding was there had not been progress from March to October. And Councilmember Hayner, particularly, I believe, was a sponsor, said, let's get this going. And the initiating committee was to fulfill an immediate step to get the ball rolling. But now that the commission is set, what those roles are, I'm not clear on. So one thing that I think that would be most helpful for progress is clarity on where those decision points are going to come from that we should look for action from. And then I guess one last thing on, I'm sure you're going to want to talk about budget and the surface lot. So I'll get back to surface lot. We can do that on your agenda. On the budget, the city's budget is going to come out in the next couple of weeks. It'll be public. I want to temper your expectations. It is a very challenging time for the city. I think it's important for you to recognize that when you think about a city budget, there's revenues and there's expenditures. Loss of revenues is a hit to the city. It doesn't help you, right, fulfill your goal, but it is an economic reality. And then on the expenditure side, because we expend public funds, we have processes we go through and rules we follow in doing that. And so commissions don't actually get budgets. They like the only commission I can think of that has a budget is our police commission, and that's a little bit of a unique situation. However, what I've heard you say is you want to be able to be publicized, to have live meetings, to have city staff support. Those are things that do not require your active approval for expenditure, but are things the city can do to facilitate your productive movement forward. And so, I've heard those things, and I just wanted to highlight that on the budget side. So,
thank you for all that, Tom. And I know that there's going to be some other items here too that will keep going that you can speak to additionally. We have Rita and then Alan.
Thanks. I just want to say that back to the issue of some of the activity of the DDA in the streets, I actually see that as a potential plus, because my understanding, although I did not attend the workshops they had recently, my understanding is that their goal is to make things more pedestrian friendly, and I think that will be a benefit to this particular project. So I think that I would welcome being working with them in some way so that we can incorporate some of those changes or give feedback on how those changes might affect this location. And I guess that's all I want to say right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Rita. Alan, and then Frank.
Well, I appreciate your comments, Tom, especially what's gotten done and that Wi-Fi is hooked up. But basically, the initiating committee or those people who are trying to get stuff together are blocked because the cars are there. And we can have program and we're trying to do this Earth Day thing, but we could just, like any other place of a park, we could just get the cars off so that people can set up some chairs and begin to hang out and be like any other public place. And the fittings, I'm sure, will come together because people want something like that. And it really somehow taking from you, directed by the city council to the DDA, and get the DDA to revise their contract that they say is till 2033 for the management of the surface, to get the cars off and let the people who want to do the gardening and play with the kids and so on be able to do it. The cars are in the way. And it doesn't take the Council of the Commons to say it. The city council has already said it twice. Get the cars off. So what is blocking it? That's really, and whether it's whose business it is less to the point. Then it should really be getting done. And it's kind of directed to you to move that. And I just wonder what is needed to move it.
I think that's going
Alan,
to be answered in the administrator's report section.
Yeah.
Maybe that is in your report. And so I'm just impatient, that's about me.
That's okay. So I think there's a number of items here that are coming up in these questions that are that I'd like to that are related to the administrator's report. And so I think if we can hold items there, we can ask Tom and bombard him with a number of questions. Related to the agenda item at hand, though, I think Frank and then Councilmember Briggs.
What I might do is wait because I was going to bring up the budget since Tom had done that. But if I should wait until his report, then I'll just hold my comments until then. What's your advice, Adam?
Yeah, why don't we do that? I feel like we've had a lot of really great dialogue on the actual task force report and review and the presentation. It feels like there's a strong desire amongst folks to figure out how we want to plan out our next steps.
Right.
And that does feel like it's a little more beyond the agenda item that we're on right now.
I agree.
Councilmember Briggs, did you want to add anything before we?
I was just going to urge us to move on the agenda. I know we had stated a goal at the last meeting to try to wrap up meetings by 9 o'clock, and I think we probably should move on.
I would agree with that sentiment. All right. So there's no action required on this item, I don't think. So why don't we advance to the next item, the administrator's report. There are 3 items noted, and actually a 4th with Rita's amended agenda item related to gardening. And so we can go in order. We can also be a little more fluid too. Tom, why don't you kick us off as you see fit?
So I'm sorry, I didn't have the agenda in front of me, so I should have said my prior comments perhaps for that. Why don't you kick me off with the first topic and I will go.
For sure. So first one is removal of parking.
So on removal parking, this is so I was looking at this. It's a little more complex. So the last I saw, as I look back into it, was Mr. Lazarus, my predecessor, in February of last year, had done some work toward this, and the conclusion after consulting with, if I remember correctly, the DDA, Library Green Conservancy, and some others, was that a shorter term, what he called one modified option. There were 3 options laid out, and he recommended one modified, which was have the deck open for parking during the week and have it closed on the weekends. And that is something that is assuming I understand who's making the decision, and if there's a body of mind on that, that's something we can pursue. That is separate. I want to be clear. Something like that is very separate than closing for an event, right? So you close for an event where you're going to have people aggregate with intentionality, with programming or something that requires a permit, and because we have to be concerned about certain things like access for fire vehicles, or whether if you've got a tent, whether it's safe and things like that. If it is just an open passive area, like you'd have if it's cleared on the weekend, a couple of things that the city needs to understand. I'm looking into right now. So there's a part. The way this works is the deck is owned by the city. The deck being the surface as well, right? But it is operated by the DDA. The DDA has an agreement with the city in order to do that. In that agreement, and part of some other agreements with the city, the DDA pays all of the debt service on that structure. They perform all of the maintenance, they collect all the revenues, and they do all that. The bonds that were issued to construct that deck, I'm checking to see if removal of this function or activity, which has a removal of revenue stream, is a permissible thing under that bond covenant. So that's something I'm checking into. But we would, if that is permissible, then we also need to change the parking agreement. And the way that would work is the city would issue notice to the DDA saying we would like this cleared. And in this case, it might be we would like it cleared on weekends when there's not like a special event like an art fair or something like that. I mean, you have to qualify that stuff, but we could issue that and then work with them on what would happen thereafter. But in order for us to close, and one of my hesitations in doing that is from a public safety standpoint, I need to understand what's going to be there. You don't just throw benches or tables up, right? I mean, who's going to clean that, right? If it's dirty, there's care, there's security and maintenance and safety that have to be understood in a plan before we do something from a public perspective. And those are all things that we can work through, but we actually need to have that conversation and some work done in that regard. So I think clearing the structure in some form, I go back to my prior comment, I kind of need to be clear on who's looking to do it, how long, that kind of thing. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention one other thing before. As far as assets on the site, there was also a comment about, or in prior readings about this, about restrooms. And I would point out that while the library is not open now, and they have restrooms that would be available, the Blake Center across the street is. So there are water and restrooms available in the area that are publicly available at this time.
We can be a little more fluid, or we could do questions kind of throughout. Why don't we go ahead and do that? Stephen, you have your hand up, and we can also come back to things. We're still on the same agenda items, so that's fine.
I guess it's my typical question, right? Where are we talking about? Are we just talking about the surface lot with, like, it's got meters at it right now? It's not, you don't have to drive down into the structure. We're just talking about, it's like a dozen or so spaces adjacent to the library, right on 5th there. Is that what we're talking about?
If the city were to close that area, it would be just that enclosed parking area, not the library lane, because you need access, as Alice or Rita or somebody was referring to with turn lanes and stuff. So it would be just that metered area. If you wanted more area, we can talk about it, but that was my understanding in this conversation.
Okay. No, that was mine too. I just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Why don't we keep going here, because we do have some other items, and to be conscious of time. Do you want to touch more on the budget? I know we got into this a little bit, but it probably behooves a further conversation.
I don't have additional comments. I can try to respond to questions. It's just that really comes out next week, but I kind of shared what I had to share on that. Sorry.
Okay. Frank, yeah, I remember you had a question. Go ahead.
Well, just commenting on, Tom, on your report on the surface area. I know there's complexities everywhere, but, and I don't understand how the DDA interacts with the city in a granular way. But one would think that the downtown development would include open space and public space and welcoming space. And it seems like the DDA should be embracing this at some level, and I don't see it. They should be looking for ways to help turn this into a productive public space. On the budget, I get these wonderful shout outs, and tonight was another one. Of course, I only get quoted on the portion that people want to make about my utterances about fundraising. From day one, I've made it clear that for this to be successful, the Park and Commons, it has to be a partnership between public and private sources. And so what I'm going to suggest is for the budget, and I'm going to ask councilpersons Hayner and Briggs to sort of take this on. We have raised $35,000, which doesn't sound like a lot of money, but it is $35,000. I have considerable hope that we can do better and much better than that. I would like to see the city anticipate further success and to allocate. I don't know whose budget it would land in. It's obviously not the Council for the Commons budget because we don't have one, but to match up to $50,000 in private gifts in the next fiscal year for a total of $100,000 that can be used to help activate this site in an initial way. It's not the final solution here, but let's really, and if you want to pull in some DDA money somehow through a magic wand, I'll take that money as well, and so will the citizens. But I think we need to break the logjam and see something substantive and creative and meaningful happen to form this public and private partnership. And I think that's what the block partners are all about. Those are businesses that have a stake in the future of this space. And we have not in any way, we, the Library Green Conservancy, have not approached them. But they need to be brought into the conversation and start to, you don't take a stake in something unless you're asked for opinions and advice and input. And we need to turn to these key block partners to begin to bring them into the conversation. Once they begin to see what's possible and that they are being heard and that they have an influence on the future of this project, they're more than likely to support it in financial ways that we can't quite understand yet. But I've seen it happen. I'm actively working on fundraising, but I didn't say I was going to raise tens of millions of dollars. You can quote me on that. So back to you, Adam.
Thanks, Frank. Alan?
Yeah, well, I've been the one that says this is something beautiful in the center of the city. Money is no problem, and there's lots of wealth in Ann Arbor that would finance it. That it's a partnership with the city, that's all well and good. I basically support Frank's notion about that. But in terms of the full vision, I think that there's private money who are benefactors for Ann Arbor, and that what we should be looking at is to make something beautiful that engages the community, that really touches the heart of Ann Arbor. I do, though, want to press forward on making this space available so that it can be made nice and welcoming, and have some tables there and have some people. And if it needs, that we need a maintenance committee to meet with the police, that meet with a DDA, that meet with you, the city administrator, so that we figure just how to do it. We should do it, because spring is coming and people would like it, and you can certainly find chairs and so on. And there's not a lot of cars that are on there ever. So it isn't like in this day and age, it's going to be a big loss of parking. It just seems that it could be done and that it's about time. So I hope that in some way we can figure out how to move this forward. I did get word from community services that probably our Earth Day is yes, it's going to be approved, and the cars would be off for that, and they should just stay off, but they should be off sooner than that. And I hope we can figure out how to do something that really brings a good energy into the spring in this place.
Yes, sir. If I could make a couple comments on that. Yeah, I'm excited about the event you're planning, Alan. My understanding is the only thing left to do is just have the proof of insurance, and then everything from the city is approved. So that's great. As far as a couple of comments, as far as the DDA, I could work. I've already had discussions with the DDA on this. I do think it's important for everyone to realize the situation we're in economically. And I can't help where we were a year, 2 years ago. The DDA has had a tremendous financial hit, tremendous. And if you want to learn more about it, look at their presentation recently to City Council or their recent board meetings. I mean, their revenues are down huge. So that is not a place that we just kind of go and grab money, right? I mean, they are challenged. There's been a significant reduction in the support that they've their contractor, Republic Parking, to manage the structures. They have shrunk that a lot. There's a lot of concerns that they have with finances, and they're having to be very careful on how they manage their monies. I do want to kind of separately from that caution us about parks. The ballot language did not put this in the city's park system. This is a public open space, and I just want to make sure we're all aware of what that means. That means that I mean, the city itself, it doesn't matter what you are. We're going to help move this forward, but the park system is a body that has some dedicated funding to it that would not be available to this effort because it's not in the system. So I just want to clarify that point. We'd have to find other ways to do it. And then lastly, on the fundraising, my experience, I've been on some nonprofit boards, is the most successful fundraising happens when you really have the vision that something that people can buy into. It's not just the reaching out and the conversation with the stakeholders, but it's that compelling story on why it's right to be there. And that's why I really want to focus everyone, if I could, on what I think is most useful, is to continue working on short, medium, and long term, what it is you want this to be. Things will fall into place, I think, as that kind of, if we can make progress on those things, I think you'll see things fall into place. The community, the organizations of the community, your neighbors in the site, we all understand how things work and can work toward a direction, but we need that direction.
Thank you for the comment, Tom, as well as the answer to those questions. Frank, and then Rita, and then Jennifer.
Just a quick comment, something that I'd like us to work on between now and the next meeting. I'm hearing, I think correctly, we need a vision. We need a process to begin to pull together and unify around a set of dimensions for this park and commons. And I think it's going to come in stages, but I don't want to pre-guess or predetermine that. But I think we need a facilitated working session of this council. And a gentleman whose name has come up before, Robert Black, who has been working with the initiating committee. Robert lives in Vermont, but he's had 40 years of living in Ann Arbor. He comes back a couple of months a year to visit grandchildren and to work on elements. He has volunteered pro bono to help us organize a system of working sessions. He's not trying to determine how many there are, to move this along so we can build consensus around a vision and a plan. And I really think we need to seriously engage this idea. He says it doesn't have to be him. He's willing to work with someone in the Ann Arbor community. I know there was concern about going to someone outside. Well, in our mind, Robert Black is Ann Arbor. He's had a long history here. He continues to visit and spend a substantial amount of time. He's very conversant with the issues on this and other projects that he's worked on in Ann Arbor. So I just lay that out there. And I think of Adam and Alice to work between now and when we have to set the agenda for the next meeting to try to create a mechanism. And I think Tom's absolutely right. We need a process to solidify a vision. And I see phase one of that is what I call establishing the beachhead, but there's more to it, obviously, down the road. And Alan is more articulate than I am about that. But I'll stop there. But I put that issue on the table.
Adam, if I could comment on that real quick.
Yep.
From a process perspective, Frank, I would say the city, we take the effort to go through kind of an open procurement process to ensure that we have, independent, Mr. Black, no comment on Mr. Black, but we usually go through a public process. I mean, I don't know him, but he seemed very Ann Arbor-y to me. So I get it. My comment is that we go through a public process so that we are completely transparent. People understand there are no hidden agendas in this. It's a trust building effort that we go through as we go through that. And I would welcome, if we do that, I would welcome his participation. But I think it's important to follow those kind of processes as we move forward to ensure no one feels excluded for any reason.
That's fine. And someone is going to have to help walk us through that process. But I understand that. And he doesn't feel it has to be him, but he's eager and willing to participate if that ends up being the end product of the process.
Okay. Being cognizant of time, we're about 11 minutes to our desired end time here. I want to make sure we get Jennifer, then Councilmember Briggs, and then I'd like to see if we can move on to that. I know we added an item to talk about gardening too, and I want to be cognizant of Rita's request there. Jennifer?
I think my feedback will be really quick. I'm a huge fan of crawl, walk, run. And so I think when we look at the space that's available adjacent to it in terms of Liberty Plaza, are there opportunities when we have things that we're sort of trying to pull people to engage within the space? Can we use Liberty Plaza first and then show capacity to grow without? Because I feel like that would, again, in the vein of inclusivity, maybe get support or additional buy-in or community recognition of the need for, or inspiration around, or creativity and creative thinking around what an adjacent space would be. So we're really focused on, I feel like a big hot topic today has been moving the cars, but there's an entire cement slab of equal space right there that's not being utilized. So I would just encourage some thinking around that. If we're thinking about ways of activating the space as a way to get support for and buy-in for what the vision for this commission is.
Thank you, Jennifer. Councilmember Briggs.
I think that's a great idea Jennifer had in terms of really trying to do more with Liberty Square Plaza. I think the community recognizes that there have been some real successes with that space in recent years, and also some challenges that we want to keep on working on. And I think city and police have been very cognizant of some of the safety issues that are around Liberty Square Plaza. I think one of the big concerns of, if I'm recollecting correctly, around the Ann Arbor District Library's concern around an unprogrammed space was that adjacent to them was that we could see additional challenges happening in our community. And I think what we want to see is building a really successful public space and demonstrating success as we move, and taking care as we go is important. Going back to Mr. Crawford's comments kind of at the beginning around kind of different options for thinking about removing parking. I do have some concerns about thinking about if we're going to remove parking just for the weekend. In many ways, that's actually much more challenging than removing parking all of the time, because if you think about putting up picnic tables or plantings, as Rita's about to speak to, those are things that are more permanent in nature. And so I think there are some additional challenges to thinking about it just on a weekend basis. And it may just being able to go through and understand, do we have the ability right now to remove that parking, and what realistically does the space look like right now if we remove that parking? That may not be demonstrating the success that we want to on day one. So to Jennifer's point, we may be able to demonstrate some of those successes by initially focusing on another area of that space, that Liberty Square Plaza, initially, as we work through and really develop those strong short-term and long-term plans.
Thank you, Councilmember Briggs. Frank?
Just quickly, I want to support Jennifer's idea. I think, and Jennifer and I have had an email exchange about this. I think a working committee or subcommittee needs to be organized, hopefully by the next meeting or on the next meeting agenda, on security and public safety. We need to bring the police department in, bring in interested parties. I think of the homeless community organizations, ground cover. I'm sure I'm not thinking of them. I'm somewhat active in that community in various ways, and I think it's time that we develop a working code of behavior and conduct, and to turn this into a more welcoming space for the entire community. Wouldn't that be a wonderful thing to achieve in the next period of time? And I think that needs to be wrapped into the concerns and considerations for the library lot. It's all one topic in two spaces that will be linked in one way or another. But that's enough for now.
Thank you, Frank. Rita, you've had your hand on and off, so I want to make sure we get you here.
I changed my mind at one point. I just wanted to ask a question. Liberty Plaza is a park right now, correct? So so I just want to establish that. And second of all, I feel like we have the opportunity to keep the whole commons in its structure, but to use some of the policies and procedures that parks use on managing open space. And so I feel like that would be something that we should look into. What is it that parks do that manage those spaces? And second of all, with respect to Liberty Plaza, it does need a major redo, and it has for probably 20 years, in my opinion. There's just too much cement there to make it a welcoming place. And I'd love to be involved with redesigning that. Where that stands in terms of where we go right now, I think we need to figure out. Thanks.
Definitely.
Adam?
Yeah.
Thank you, Rita. I was going to make the same comment. Parks has a well-vetted and experienced set of guidelines and rules for parks. As you can imagine, in Ann Arbor, they've been tested along with the years, First Amendment rights, and all that stuff. And it's when the development was going to be done on this site, and there was this open space planned along with the high rise. That was the negotiated conclusion, was that they were going to use the park's rules, even though it was going to be maintained by that developer. So I would encourage you to actually start with the park's rules, and you might find them very helpful.
Thank you. Great.
Tom, the next sub item here, interim activities, and we sort of added a sub item to that with Rita's. If it's all right with you, could we address the gardening item, the gardening question that Rita had posed?
Sure. So I know it sounds easy just to plant some flowers. However, it is a little more complicated. A couple of complicating factors that I would think that we need to think about. My understanding is you're talking about having flowers in the beds that are there, not bringing on new things. If that's the case, that was my assumption. Those beds have an irrigation system in them. If you're not aware of that. And so my suggestion on how to move that forward, I think we can do it expeditiously, but is to probably have an MOU with maybe it's the LGC, Library Green Conservancy, or whomever, and then waivers of release from any of the volunteers. So when we run any city program and we have volunteers that work with us, we have to worry about damage to a public asset, whether that's concrete, whether it's an irrigation system, plants, whatever, and we worry about the safety of the people we work with. So for planting, I would envision that we would probably close the lot. We don't really want people doing that activity while there are cars there. We would want these kind of forms signed by the volunteers, which is, I would imagine, not problematic to people. And then I think ideally, the MOU could set a framework for how this and other activities going forward would be handled. One of the key things being really the safety and maintenance that we need to keep forefront of mind. So.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Tom, just real quickly, are there any other not explicitly enumerated items you wanted to talk about as part of your report?
No, I'll just mention, kind of jumping back to a little bit on how the surface could be used. I talked to the DDA. There was a question about, is there storage space there? So I don't know if that means tables or chairs, but we could look at some storage space in the structure where a key could be provided to someone. That's not something that the DDA would probably move for you, but as a commons group, if that's what they wanted to do, I think there's some opportunity for some solution there. I think Alan had asked about that earlier. So
Good.
Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up too. Okay, Councilmember Briggs.
Yeah, I just had a question around gardening and kind of how that was going. I mean, obviously since one of the advantages to some degree, the space already is being managed by the DDA. Obviously there's plantings and that are around many of our surface lots downtown, and thinking about what the DDA was already planning for those spaces and how that could be accentuated, because they're already maintaining garden beds in other spaces, and how that relates to the thoughts of the initiating committee, I guess, would be helpful.
Thank you. Alice?
Really quick, along with Erica's comments, cleaning and keeping upkeep, I guess is what I'm really talking about storage as well. But upkeep seems like it would be easier. And Republic has to clean the whole structure. Seems like cleaning that surface would be easier without the cars when it's necessary to do something without the cars. I mean, they already do clean it. So it seems like that wouldn't be much of a change for them, but maybe that's naive of me to think that.
It's a different kind of cleaning if you have people with food. I mean, it's not like a car driving through, right?
Right,
You're talking
right.
about disposable stuff being, yeah.
Yeah, I get it, but still, they do have to do some cleaning. So part of it, may be shared.
Alan? I think you're muted, Alan.
How polite of me. The comment about the DDA having its plantings and plans and maintenance, or otherwise, that's just not so. We tried to contact the DDA and Republic Parking, who were the people that actually were taking care of this. And really echoing what Tom said, DDA is cut back considerably, Republic Parking is cut back considerably. They can do nothing more than minimum maintenance and have no capacity, nor actually apparently the human knowledge of what all these plants are. We've asked, what is everything? What's their condition? And we are here to help, but they say they have, Mara Thompson says they don't have any staff to do anything there. So the gardening coming out of the community is really what is needed. And we're trying to do so that they know exactly what is happening and can be in the process till we can figure out a better process.
So we're now at 9:02, so we're a little bit past. I want to be conscious of trying to move forward. Are we satisfied at this point with Administrator Crawford's update? There are obviously a lot of other questions and also some suggestions that came out of that too. Rita, you have your hand up.
Thanks. Yeah, my question is really kind of the impatient one. And given the season where we are right now, beginning of the growing season, and observing that the beds that are there in that open surface lot look like they could use some maintenance, some help, some refreshing. That would make it a very pleasant look, even if we didn't even use it for the open spaces that we want. It could look a lot better. So I'm just asking, how do we get to a point of making a decision on whether people can proceed? And I understand that the DDA wants to know what is planted and have a hand in it, but I did get the impression that they were not available to provide us with help on it. And as far as Liberty Plaza, I guess we would have to work with Parks on their plans for that.
Tom, I guess the question, just to follow up with that, is there, you had mentioned a few actions specifically about what you would want to, what the city would want to do. Is there a way that I mean, I don't think necessarily you need a action or recommendation from this body on this. Is that the case, or is that something the city would be looking for?
You know, ideally, we would be maybe a meeting or two ahead here where your bylaws are passed and we understood how decisions are going to be made and all that. So I don't know, it'd be helpful to hear from the group if there's what the support is for an MOU closing the deck, you know, to get some flowers in as a non-permanent thing, but a temporary thing. And then secondarily, if there is still interest in opening up the space, where is that interest? Is it weekends or more permanent than that? It has a lot of ramifications we would have to kind of start sorting through.
Okay.
And I don't know if you want to wait till the next meeting when we actually have those rules outlined. On the plantings, it's obviously time sensitive. So, you know, unless someone has an issue, you know, it'd be helpful to know if somebody has an issue or a concern around that.
I guess why don't we ask a question, you know, without taking a formal recommendation. Rita, I know you've expressed, and I have to apologize, I'm not as much of a grower myself. So what are the season that we're looking at here? What's the window of time?
Well, this is still a little early, but this could be a time where some preparation, cleaning the surface and preparing the soil for planting soon, but it likely could be some things later in this month. And it's also possible that May might be okay, but I wouldn't want to go later than May. The way our weather is changing, we probably would want to get things established as soon as we could.
I guess, so I'll just ask a question. Does anyone have a concern with Rita and Mr. Crawford starting to talk more about what specifics would go into the items that he described regarding planting, the MOU, you know, between a potential third party and the city, and also the liability waivers, things of that sort?
Didn't we used to have annual volunteer plantings on Main Street? I don't see how much different that could be.
Yeah, I believe the Main Street is done by the Main Street District. I don't think the business district, I don't think that is a city managed event.
Well, they have Girl Scouts and stuff like that helping with that. So, you know.
Yeah.
And there has been planting in Liberty Plaza as well.
Mhm.
Wednesday is in May, and that's a planting around this whole downtown area that's based from Liberty Plaza. We tried to cooperate in that last year, but everything got closed down for the health situation.
So I guess kind of going back to the question I had is there any concern with that action proceeding by any member of the Council of the Commons?
So I guess, I'm sorry, I should probably raise my hand, not just blur out questions. The idea would be to have an MOU with the DDA. Did I hear that right? And to get some sort of closing of the surface lot organized, and then have waivers. I'm envisioning kind of similar to maybe the Adopt a Park volunteer kind of waivers that people sign. Those are sort of the specific action steps we would want to have in place before we have people showing up doing plantings.
Yeah.
Those don't seem like high risk activities for us to do, in terms of not having our bylaws in place and so forth. It would seem that that's something we could probably pursue between now and the next meeting. So yeah.
Good.
So do we have raise my hand. Do we have like the who does what? Do I meet with? Do I draft something? Who can I reach out to get that process going?
Rita, I can reach out to you later.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Excellent. Frank, you had your hand raised patiently for a little while.
Yeah, well, gee, I've been talking too much, but I don't want to vote on that. Back to this idea of a working session of the council, and we're going to go through a process where there's a RFP or whatever process. That implies someone's going to get paid for something, and we're back to the public-private partnership. I didn't get any response from Erica or Jeff whether they're willing to, as council people, willing to bring forward a proposal for some additional funding beyond what covers our administration of this council's activities. And I'd like to hear whether that's a possibility.
Yeah, so Councilmember Heener had his hand up first, and then we'll go to Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Well, I put a request in when we put in our budget request sort of generically with Mr. Crawford about this, and he and I spoke on, and I think he spoke with you too, Councilwoman Briggs, about the notion that deferring revenue is similar to spending, is similar to an expense. And so the way that, and the numbers weren't put out there when Mr. Crawford ably explained the relationship of the contract with the DDA and the debt service that is bound to those bonds and so on. And so if I recall our conversation, I didn't take notes because I was at work, but the debt service on that is bound to the revenue that potential revenue for those surface lots over the course of the entire year, the surface spots, which is about $270,000, something like that. There's $130,000 worth of debt service bound to that, if I recall.
Right, it's about $130,000 in debt service attributable to the surface lot we're referring to.
And so, in a sense, I mean, that's very real money. And in a sense, if we're asking to remove the parking, and we may be also asking they may turn around and say, okay, who's going to pay that 130,000, or who's going to pay 270,000 or whatever? That I don't recall the other number. And so, in a way, that by such means our budget's created, I guess I'll say. And so, if I say, hey, I'd love $50,000 for the center of the city to have some room there to do some benches and some minimal improvements to the space, we're also saying we also have to recognize that removing the cars ties into this agreement that the DDA has for the bond issuance on those. And we're also asking them to forego 130,000 or 270,000 in revenue. And so it's more of a challenge than just saying I need a little money for center of the city, I guess is what I'll say. Although I think it's perfectly legitimate idea to say we could put a placeholder in the budget to potentially match funds that are raised privately. I don't have a problem with that. I don't know what the mechanism would be though. So I'll have to have that conversation offline with Mr. Crawford. I think it's an interesting notion that we try and do that to not only spurn private fundraising, but just sort of, make that commitment. It's just a line item, but I don't know the mechanism for that. So
Can I just respond? We've gone from the previous city administrator saying publicly through communications, implying that we would aggregate the money that was being paid for those spots on the surface, and that would in some portion be contributed to the Park and Commons effort. Now we got a debt situation implied here. So
no, I think I think it was just moving things around in the budget line items. I mean, I won't, obviously, he's not here to speak for himself, but
Right.
he was a supporter of this notion. Mr. Lazarus was, and he was willing to shuffle those things around. I think Mr. Crawford is too, but we have to recognize what's going on when we do that.
Right.
Councilmember Briggs.
Thanks. Yeah, I think Councilmember Hayner spoke to a lot of the issues that I wanted to raise. I mean, it's the reason we should move carefully and deliberately as we think about what happens on that space, just so that we're because there are some real cost and significant budget implications at a time when our budget is particularly tight. I think I'm not concerned with moving to council to at some point ask for matching funds. I think we're a little ways away from that based on where we're at in the discussions right now. I sounded like in terms of what you were talking about with Mr. Black, being able to do some pro bono work with us, thinking about really moving past visioning. There are some baby steps we need to take first before maybe we get to a place where we would be looking for additional funds. I mean, I think obviously at some point we're going to be looking for some real funding to move towards design work and things like that. But I think we have some work before we get there.
We've got a couple folks on deck here. Jeff, you're up, and then Alice.
Yeah, I was wondering if Tom, you or anybody else could comment on the fact that I believe in the recent federal money that's been allocated to the cities and states, there is some budget, or there's some money that will come to Ann Arbor. I heard a figure of $12 million for various purposes. Is there any news about that? Is there any relevance of that to this issue?
I'll have comments on that within the next couple of weeks with the budget recommendation. I don't have anything tonight for that.
Alice?
Well, it just seems like I'm thinking of the cleaner fish in the ocean, where they help the whale get stuff off their skin. It seems like we could use volunteer forces to start at the edges of a problem area and sort of at least clean up a little bit. And I think that's where Rita's coming from, perhaps. And I think we should make those little steps entirely possible and supported in whatever way we can, because otherwise we just won't have anything happening until we get over these larger issues. And it would be really refreshing and motivating, I think, if we just saw things like some flowers blooming when we hadn't seen them for a while.
Yep, I would agree with that. So we are about 16 minutes past. I'd like to see if we can take a look at how we want to build the next agenda, and we can even take requests. That's what we did for this last one. We can abide by that process and set a more formal process as we adopt bylaws next time. Jennifer?
I just want to be clear on the process. Should we if we have agenda item suggestions, do they go to Heather? Do they go to you, Adam? Can you just be clear on that so that we have a path forward to end the meeting?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I would say that we should send everything to staff, so send it to Heather. I would also like to, maybe not tonight because we're over, but I'd like to try and structure our time so that we can discuss really what agenda items look like for the next agenda, so that we know a month ahead of time. So that would be my preference if we can. Going forward, and recognizing that we're a little late tonight, maybe we just send items to Heather, and then Heather, Alice, and I can get together and put together the agenda. That's how we did this one. But eventually, maybe after the next one, we really start a discussion during the prior meeting. Does that sound like a good idea to most folks?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. All right. If that's okay, then we'll move into public comment.
You're muted, Heather.
Yeah.
Robert Black, you should be able to talk now.
Good evening. This is Robert Black. I'm the stake in the ground guy for the work session. Thank you for talking about that again. It's not about me, it's about you. And I don't know how many hundreds of hours I've sat through over the years with Planning Commission, Energy Commission, City Council, Chamber of Commerce, everybody. And you guys have done an amazing job tonight of respectful listening and beautiful process here. And I just want to acknowledge you for that. I love the idea of baby steps. And I think that Tom has suggested something very important to you, which is short-term, intermediate term, and long-term. And so my suggestion is if you can have a working session and you have, I think it's Article 9 in your bylaws, you have some opportunities to create a working session that would be very helpful. You who are doing it here tonight, but it didn't get grounded exactly in the kind of structure that you would have in a facilitated work session. You would have a situation analysis or assessment right up front and begin to establish these background materials that could be presented to you. You could study them first and then have a systematic discussion about it. And it may be through different working sessions. One would certainly accomplish a lot with a single focus of the shorter term pieces. But you need to get your roles and responsibilities clear and your decision structure clear first. I applaud you for this work that you're doing. It is not easy. There are many complex factors in this, but you have a host of people around Ann Arbor that can do this. Dana Miller-Tyson is a senior partner, as Al Blix, that I've known for a long, long time.
30 seconds.
Carol Anderson is another one. But the big thing I wanted to just to end with is that build your alliances now and reach out into the community. We have a green up day here where we have everybody in town helps clean up the town. We have a set of ladies that handle the flower baskets, these planters that have flowers in seasonally. And it's the more you can do to engage the conversation now from your group as a catalyst for this commenting that Ms. Ralph was talking about. I think you could be the source of that public discussion going forward, and just do it. And I highly encourage you to try to find a date for your working session to do something, whomever you use to facilitate that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Heather, do we have others?
I don't see anybody else with their hands raised.
Okay. Excellent. Well, I think we can probably close public comment then. And the only thing left is if there's a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Moved. Second by either. All right, a few folks. All right, so I apologize that we're 20 minutes over, but we will work harder the next time around. I think it's been a really great discussion, and look forward to hearing ideas around the agenda. And then we will work to incorporate a time into the next agenda for future agenda building, so that we have that as included here. I think that's about it. We can wrap up. Wonderful to see everybody tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.